What is happening, people? So today what we're going to do is I don't know where to look. That's the camera. I haven't done live streaming in like 2 years since deep COVID when everyone was really lonely. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some Sony A7IV RAW files and we're going to process them with the 40 megapixel files from the new Fuji camera. So we have the X-H2 that I was using. I also have the X-T5. But today I just brought the X-H2, but they have the same sensor, the exact same image quality and all that stuff. And I took both cameras and I put the 23 millimeter 1.4 on the Fuji and threw that sucker on there, the new one. And then I took the 35 millimeter GM, right? As Terry Warfield calls it, the gangsta mode from the Sony. That's the 35 millimeter. I took those both out. And I kind of shot side by side. Now, I don't use tripods very often, and I didn't use tripods here. That's just the way it goes. So some of these are not exact, but I just had my Sony on my neck, and then I had my Fuji on my strap, my hand strap, and I was just shooting side by side. I drove around to Missouri Valley, Iowa, took some photos of some abandoned, here's an abandoned, abandoned, here, let me go to my screen. Why is it not on this screen? There it is. My abandoned, here's an abandoned bike. And then we got a whole bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other cars. We're going to look at the files. And I kind of want to do a video because I think the Fuji files are pretty good. And I was kind of dogging on the 40 megapixels the other day, but I think they stand up pretty well against the full frame 33 megapixels. And I kind of went out to do this for myself, to kind of to shoot them side by side because I've been so down on Fuji lately. And today we're using Capture One, which I don't know why I decided to do a live stream with Capture One because I don't use it very often. But I just said, wait, what the heck? Capture One 23. I have like 5 days left on my trial. So we're gonna mess around with it a little bit. So what we've got here, generally the first file in the series of just each image. The first one is the Sony file, and then we got the Fuji file, the 40 megapixel Fuji file. And as you can see, the exposures and all that stuff were not exactly the same. White balance is a little bit different on the cameras, even though sometimes the settings were almost the same. You know, I know there's differences between full frame 1.4 versus APS-C 1.4, all that crap. I don't care too much about that. We're out shooting. We're out to kind of see what we get and experience these cameras a little bit. So when I do some zooming, when we get in there, I got to double click on this, don't I? On Capture One. We can see that the Sonys are really, that looks nice, right? It's nice and crisp. This is at 1.4 on that 35 millimeters, and that looks pretty good. There I am. I look great. I look like a strange hobbit on a hill. And, but you know, it looks, oh, there I am again. That's like some kind of weird 2 different portals I'm looking at myself at. Let's go ahead and in the zoom area, go to the Fuji file, and they're pretty close, right? They're not too bad. I think the Sony's a little brighter, so let's boost up the Fuji a little bit more and do some contrast, go back and forth. And now they're about equal on exposure, and they look pretty good. You know, we have 7 more megapixels on the Fuji. So the Fuji files, when we zoom in to 100%, we go in a little bit more, but they're really comparable. It's one of those things where that's 7 megapixels. They don't make that big of a difference between the 2 cameras if you're thinking about it. But that looks pretty cool. Let's go to another scene. And this must have been like an abandoned bike on the side of the road. It's got the police tape on it. I don't know what's going on, man. Some biker just left his bike. It's like, I'm done with this thing. So, wow, those are 2 different exposures. And these are at 2.5 and 2.2. I don't know why I did 2 different things, but I did. Let's brighten this one up. The Fuji file, brighten it up. And then we'll zoom in a little bit. You can kind of read that, Nebraska. And then on the Fuji file, it looks almost the same. You know, these are not drastically different as far as quality. I was using ISO 125 the entire day for both systems. The Sony, you can get a little bit more. You can go down to 100 natively. and 125 on the X-T5 and the X-H2 are the lowest you'll go for the highest quality setting without like clipping highlights a little bit more and all that stuff. So those look pretty good. And here's another, if you want to buy this thing, I can tell you where to get it. Pretty sweet. And I don't know are you trespassing if you're just looking at the sign? I don't think so. I hope I wasn't trespassing. Or is it like, are you climbing the building and then you're trespassing? Anyways, we'll get zoomed in a little bit on the Sony file and then on the Fuji. Now, is there a comparison grid or something like that? This is why I probably should have just used Lightroom. But you know what? I didn't want people yelling at me and saying I'm representing Fuji bad if I'm using Lightroom, even though Lightroom's perfectly fine for Fuji files. But some people get crazy about that stuff. Well, I kind of like the way those reflections are in the Fuji. And I chose these lenses specifically because they're both 35 millimeters in full frame terms. And they're both like the best that you can get for each system. So that 23 1.4 for Fuji is the new one, and it's made for 40 megapixels. It is the best you can get. And then the GM, of course, is the best line that you can get from Sony, which is, I wanted to pit them together to battle. But they both look great, right? These don't look that much different. I know you're watching on YouTube, so you can't totally see, but they look fantastic. Let's see, let's brighten up. The Fujis are always a little darker. Those are about even, right? Gosh, those look good. It's a cool little scene. That's close in on that's the Sony, and that's the Fuji. Again, that's pretty close, right? That's pretty close. Dang. One of the things that you get with Fuji is you get those styles, right? So we can go to, I really like Nostalgic Negative. We can apply that file and then kind of look at that compared to the Sony, back and forth. Nostalgic Negative is like a little bit deeper, and the shadows especially have a little bit more color and a little bit more oomph to them. That looks pretty good on the Sony and the Fujis. The Fuji has a little bit more warmth with that film simulation in there. But I when I went out and shot, I accidentally did auto white balance on the Sony, and then I did daylight on the Fuji, but I went in Capture One and I just made everything daylight to kind of equalize things, and it did a pretty good job. And I just shot both of them full raw and try to match the settings as much as possible. Let's go to a couple more. Just keep rocking. Well, these are really pretty close. Less contrast on the Sony. A little bit more contrast, a little more deepness on the Fuji, just straight off. These are raw files, so you gotta judge them after you're like actually messing with them a little bit, right? But if I zoom in, this is on the Fuji file, and I'm getting a lot of really good detail. I think I'm probably getting a little bit more detail out of the Sony. When you compare all that fine texture on the Sony straight out of the box, just putting it in here, I've noticed a little bit more detail. Now, if we go to the Fuji and then we adjust it, gosh, I'm not great at, again, isn't it in details or something like that? Where's the sharpening? Refine? Oh yeah, let's sharpen this sucker a little bit. They changed some stuff in Capture One since the last time I used it. Man, I haven't used this in a long time. It's looking like exactly the same. I'm changing this amount and it's not doing much. If I change the radius, there we go. All right, so then I can pull some more detail out of that Fuji file. If you guys could look there, that's pretty close, right? Oh, that's really, really close. I'm getting a ton of detail out of that Fuji file, just like I am out of the Sony file. So I'm not sure if there's that much difference at all. They look pretty good. One of the things that we could look at in a couple of these photographs is like dynamic range. So this is a lot of sun coming in on these cars, and we can see what kind of details we have if we look into the shadows, like look inside of these, like inside of the car there and that deep black hole. So I'm going to go to adjust. We're going to blast the exposure so we can kind of see inside. This is on the Sony A7IV. And then we'll do the same on the Fuji. We'll just kind of see what those shadows look like. And if we zoom in, you can kind of see that the Sony retains better everything. It just looks a little bit better. It's like kind of a little bit blurry, but hey, it's probably just the depth of field. The Fuji definitely has more grain, right, in the shadows. But honestly, guys, remember, I'm pixel peeping. What am I, zoomed in at like 700% or something crazy? If you're looking at this thing far away, it looks great. Now, can we fix this? Can we go in? Can we actually bring some detail back? Let's bring the whites down. Oh, it looks terrible. I'm not going to do that. We would just go in. We'd boost our shadows probably. Where's our shadows at? Apply some contrast. Go in. Let's make the sky a little bit deeper. We can get crazy. Look at that. That looks terrible, but warm it up a little bit. Oh, that's terrible. I just made the picture worse, I think, from the original. That's all right. We're just experimenting. We're just doing this for fun. Here's the moving on. So you can tell I'm not an expert at all at Capture One. I can make my files look fantastic on Lightroom, but hey, let's try new things. So we got a Sony file. Ooh, I was standing pretty. I just took a pretty good. I was just standing there with both cameras going like this. I did a pretty good job with this one, matching things up. It's a little dark though. Let's boost it up and warm it up. It's so cold. And then compare it to that Fuji file. We'll boost that up too. The contrast looks good just right out of the box. You know, this is one of those things that like Fuji files come out of the box. Even the raw files look a little bit pretty legit. And those look good. We can look into the car. There's a butternut coffee filter. Isn't that great? Butternut coffee. That's the Sony. And that's the Fuji. They look really close, guys. Like, I mean, the Sony out of the box has more detail, but we just saw that we could actually tweak things and bring some of that detail back. That might be why I'm using Capture One, because I think the sharpening in Capture One, in my experience, is always done a little bit better. Here is the Sony file. We're at a 5.6, and here's a Fuji file 5.6. It's kind of weird though. Those are almost the same exposures. Oops. If you look at them side by side, very similar, but my shutter speeds, one's the Fuji's 800, Sony's 1000, whatever. How's that look? Warm it up. You know, I'm always warming my stuff up. Are you guys? It's one of those things. I'm zooming in. This is on the Fuji file, Sony file. These look fine. Guys, there's almost no difference, honestly. In good conditions, with low ISOs, right, with 125, these things match each other blow for blow, I really think. It's like one of those things where you could take both out, and you could take almost anything out. You could take a Canon, whatever, my old 5D Mark II, and get fantastic results in these kind of settings, right? Nice and bright light. You just put a new, like, nice lens on it, and you're going to just rock. Let's skip around a little bit. There's an area. These are some cool old cars, aren't they? Look at those cars. Those are sweet. Look at the difference in color just right out. From the Sony, a lot bluer, and the Fuji. The Fuji's just look so good coming out of the box. My goodness. Let's look inside one of these cars. It's kind of a cool shot. This is at 1.8 on both cameras. And I know that Sony, like, full frame has a different way it renders things compared to APS-C. But if you can look at these two, they look really similar. There's more blur on the Sony with the full frame sensor. So if you look at the background, you can see that the dashboard is a little bit blurrier. A little tiny bit more blurry. But if we look at the detail, this is with the Sony on that steering wheel. Looks really cool. And then we look at it like this. Gosh, there's more contrast in that Fuji. It's hard to judge them. Fuji does something with their files to make them look better right away. Let's see. There's quite a bit of detail. Again, the original RAW files do not from Fuji have as much sharpness. If you look right there, if we get in close there, that's at like 400,000%. I don't know what that is. The Sony definitely has some more detail, but honestly, everyone, even if I didn't sharpen the Fuji files, they would look fantastic. And they would look fantastic if I was going to print them at like 40 or 50 or 60 inches. No joke. I am not kidding. And the reason I can say this is I did an art show where I had these giant files and these giant prints everywhere. And some of those small details, when you're printing them, they just look fine. It's us pixel peepers who are like zooming in at 4,000% and trying to compare these files. But the Sony is more money than the X-H2 or the X-T5, you know, like a good $500, $600, $700, $800 or so just for the camera. And that means a lot, right? And if you're out there in good conditions and you want to get an X-T5 and use that 40 megapixel sensor, you're going to have some good luck. You're going to get some great shots. Let's go to, let's look at that 100%. This is the Sony. Looks beautiful. Look at all that detail. And that is the Fuji. It looks pretty good too. I think I'm focused right here. The Sony was focused right in the middle. That's my fault. I focused in 2 different spots. When I was out shooting, I was shooting in full manual mode, and I would switch sometimes between autofocus single and like manual focus as well, because some of these things are kind of hard to focus on. One weird thing I want to tell you that's kind of weird is on some of these shots here, I was just kind of side by side checking out the continuous autofocus. Like if you do wide tracking and then you select a spot and you tell the camera to stick to that spot and you can move around. When I would put the Fuji, and that's the Fuji file, gosh, it's beautiful. When I would do the Fuji and I would put my focus dot right here, like right in the middle, it would slide to the left. It would just go, it would like bounce around like crazy. And I could put it anywhere else on the screen. It would be fine. But this grid right here, like kind of messed it up. It was kind of weird. I did that. The same thing happened at a waterfall. And I put my Fuji, that was the X-H2. I put the tracking on the lip of the waterfall where the water is coming over. And man, it just kept like going back and forth. That was super weird. So it happened again at this location. And I don't know why, but it was kind of weird. Look at this. Oldsmobile Rocket. How cool is that? That's a little bit dark. Boost the contrast. Add the warmth. That looks pretty good. Oldsmobile Rocket. I love that. You know, which files do you guys like better? It's one of those things. I think they look so similar. You know, it would help if I could aim if I could use a tripod. Almost never. Less depth of field on the Sony, a little bit more on the Fuji, or I just focus in the spot. But man, that's good detail right there. That looks really, really good. If we go to, where is it at? Ooh, refine. And we sharpen that. Look at that. That Fuji file really can stand up to some sharpening to match the Sony. We get a lot of detail there. And we get a lot of detail there. You know, I think that there is a difference. I think that Sony files in general have a little bit more definition, a little bit, they just look a little tiny touch, like that much better. But it's full frame. Full frame is just better than APS-C, just like APS-C is just better than Micro Four Thirds, and medium format's better than all the rest of them. In general terms, right? In image quality terms, that's kind of the case. But the idea that I could take this APS-C sensor out and it can go and have pretty much like 98% as good image quality in these situations, at least. Like that is really cool for the Fujis. That's pretty awesome. Oh, here's a landscape. Well, kind of a landscape, right? It's just like a road next to this abandoned place where I found all these abandoned things. And let's go ahead and boost our stuff to make them look a little bit better. The Fuji file, again, comes out just looking a little bit better, doesn't it? Gosh, dang. Look at that. You can go and make the sky a little bit darker. Oh my gosh, this is fun. I love editing. You know, I'm one of those people who I enjoy editing almost as much as going out and taking photos. I'm kind of crazy like that. But if we look, oh geez, that Fuji file looks great. If we zoom in, I think I was at F8. Yeah, so I was at F8 on both of these, and we just get lots of detail in the background on both files. They look fantastic. They both look fantastic. Some probably more micro detail in the Sony, but we could sharpen the Fuji's up a little bit. Let's go to this. I had to manually focus on this sucker, but I used F8.2. That's the Sony, Fuji. You're basically seeing right there. I was standing pretty good, man. I was holding the cameras pretty close. You're seeing when I zoom in the difference between the 33 and the 40 megapixels. So that's 33 megapixels and that's 40. You just get a little bit more. It's not that much of a big deal at all compared to those, you know, when you compare those two cameras. The Fuji is a lot darker. What was my setting? 8,000 on our shutter, 1.4. Oh, you know, on one of these, before I forget, where was it? I was going to show you guys. Oh, right here. I think we skipped over this. This is on the Sony, and let's say you're out and you're shooting with the Sony camera. Even though it has an electronic shutter and stuff like that, you can't take it above 8,000. So that was like frustrating when I first got my Sony A7IV. I was like, why can't I take that above 8,000? What is happening? In Fuji, on the X-T5 and the X-H2, you can go to 180,000, which is ridiculous. So this was at the limits of the light in this spot. So I was at 1.4. And it was just a little bit too bright. So 8,000 was not enough to cut the exposure a little bit. So on the Fuji, though, I can go to 10,000 and it cut the exposure just enough to get the good shot. And on something like this, nothing's moving. We don't have to really be too careful about any kind of warbling or anything like that. But that looks awesome. The Sony just ran up against the 8,000 shutter speed limit. Let's look at a couple more. Kind of neat. Gosh, these old cars are so cool, aren't they? Oops, that's the Sony, and that's the Fuji. And the Fuji's colors just hit so nice. I love them. Now, I can, in Lightroom especially, like, I don't know this program very well, so Sony people don't yell at me. But, you know, oh, yeah. I got a comment. Yes, and I said, somebody said that... I'm not sure what point we started comparing APS-C cameras to full frame cameras. Full frame is better, period. And that's true. I agree. And I said that earlier, right? We should be getting the Fuji Canon R7 and the Sony A whatever. Yeah, you know what? That's true. But one of the reasons I wanted to show this video is because the Fuji files, those new megapixel, the 40 megapixel files are actually pretty close in these kind of good conditions. Like, they're actually very close. When you're going to print these, you're going to see almost no difference, in my opinion. And I've shot a lot of medium format. And then, you know, the difference between medium format and large megapixel full frame is not that big of a difference. There's a difference there, especially the glass is what really makes a difference with medium versus full frame. But on full frame versus APS-C, you are right. Full frame will beat it in pretty much almost any category, especially with nice lenses and all that stuff. But I'm pretty proud of Fuji for keeping up and kind of pushing the game a little bit. These files actually do look pretty good compared to the Sony. So if we look at this again, this is the Sony. Looks great. There's a lot of detail. We look at the Fuji, and it also looks fantastic with a lot of detail. I think that the files hold up really well. The full frame lust is strong with some. Yes, it is strong with some, and there is a difference in full frame versus APS-C, right? But it's not as big of a deal in some situations. Let's keep going. Look at that car. Such cool stuff. Love it. And let's see. Let's look inside of a car again. Do we have any kind of... Oh, let's look at this one. This one's a good one. Full sun. So this is one of those dynamic range ones. We got full sun, and it's super bright out. And what we can do is we can brighten it up even more to kind of look inside. So we're going to zoom in and then take the Fuji file, zoom in, and boost everything to kind of look at that dynamic range. And yeah, I think the Sony is probably a little bit better, but the Fuji holds up pretty well. You know, on the X-Trans is looking pretty good though. This is the X-Trans sensor with the look at the accurate rendition of the colors right here and in this spot right here. And look at how messed up the Sony is. Now it's easy to fix, right? It's an easy fix to make, but it's just one of those cool things about the X-Trans, about Fuji cameras. But that looks pretty good. You know, both have a little bit of muddier inside of those interiors where you have to brighten it up a little muddier, but I mean, it's acceptable, right? It's something you can work with. The detail is actually there, so we're getting a good amount of dynamic range with both cameras, regardless of full frame and APS-C. Love this. Cool spot. And then after that, I think that was my last, these are my last comparison shots. And then I just walked around with the Fuji, kind of exploring, looking at these old cars and having a lot of fun. I'm using my X-H2 to shoot birds with the 150 to 600. The 150 to 600 looks amazing. I'm going to get that lens someday. That thing looks awesome. And I think there's a big delay between when you guys comment and when I see it. I think that's latency. I got to get better at live streaming. But this is one of those shots I really like. Cool. Look at all that detail there. The lights coming in a cool way through the shadows. I got my focus right there, I think. There's 100%. And this is one of those ones where you could warm up a touch. We could boost. Oh, man, look at that. That's pretty cool. And then if we wanted to go in and refine and go to some details, look at that. That sharpening really does do a great job with Fuji files on Capture One. I think Capture One does do a lot better job of sharpening. That's one of the reasons I use it, and I keep it around every once in a while when I need to do some of that stuff. So I think we're going to stop it right there. I just wanted to show that 100% these files between the Sony A7IV and the Fuji X-H2 or X-T5 with their 40 megapixels. A couple observations, like number one is the 33 versus the 40 megapixels is almost no difference. Those 7 megapixels do not really matter that much. You're not getting a ton more out of the Fuji, but the Fuji files hold up pretty well when you're looking at them, comparing them side by side. In my opinion, it's going to be more apparent, like the flaws in APS-C versus full frame when we're in a lot more difficult conditions. However, right, these are pretty awesome anyway. I mean, I really love the Fuji colors, the way the Fuji files render, and it's a lot of fun to go in and do the film simulations. In Capture One, we have the ability to get in there and look at all of them at once. Same thing in Lightroom, but I think Capture One does a little bit of a better job of rendering the film simulations from Fuji. But man, the way that we can get these files to look so amazing. Oh, I love Nostalgia Native. Just by changing the film simulation, it's a lot of fun. But Fuji, Sony files you can also make look fantastic too. It's just editing. And I think we'll end it there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to upload a couple of these files so you could actually take these and download them. If you're thinking between these two cameras, and I know like I've had this specific question, which one would you get, the A7IV or the X-H2 or the X-T5? You can kind of look at them yourself. Real quick, somebody said, have you figured out the autofocus issues? And I think I figured out that they're in that situation. It's just the X-H2 and the X-T5 cannot keep up in that specific situation. That's it. And it's having inconsistencies. I think that when you look at my comments on both of my videos where I talked about the Fuji autofocus problems, there are a ton of people that are telling me they're seeing the exact same thing that I'm seeing. There are some people saying that they don't see that and they're getting fine autofocus, and that's awesome. I wish them well. That's super cool. But way more people are either commenting on my YouTube videos or they're like just emailing me and they're telling me like, hey, I am seeing the same thing with birds, with kids, with animals, with all these different things. And one guy's like, hey, if I'm looking at a bird and it's in the sky, it looks great. But as soon as buildings, I'm in a city, so it's a little bit harder. As soon as there's anything that the camera has to compete with, it loses the bird completely. And that kind of sucks. And I talked to another portrait photographer who is like so fed up with this. He had the shooting season is done and all that stuff, but he is gathering his entire Fuji system to sell it because he is having such bad luck with the continuous eye focus. And he rented a Canon R5 or 6. And he was like, you know what? It makes me feel so confident that the camera is going to get the focus. He's going to go with, I think, the Canon. And that's one of those things. But I hope other people are not having problems. I want everybody to love their cameras, right? And have fun doing photography and taking great photographs and getting good shots for their clients and all that stuff. I primarily shoot landscapes and have an X-T4, but need a second body. Is the jump that significant in image quality from your perspective? No, it's not. That's maybe another live stream. I can take out I'll take out the X100 with the, it's got a 35 millimeter lens on it, right? I'll take out the X100 and I'll take out one of these, and the image quality is pretty comparable. You get a little bit more resolution, right? In real life, the resolution jump from 26 to 40 sounds big, but it's not that big. It is decent. It's like a little bit, but I don't think it's that huge a jump. I'm not sure if it's worth the money. Okay, I really don't. I think Nostalgic Negative as a film simulation is a lot of fun. It's my favorite out of the GFX cameras, but I'm not sure exactly if it's worth the money. The X-T4 is still a rock solid machine. It really is. And then, yes, I saw your poster for Ed Miranda. A bunch of the Fuji apologists came to Fuji's rescue, and I know that. I'm staying away from those places. I once posted in DP Review one time a seriously just innocent question. Years ago, my friend was asking me, "Hey, he's not really online." And he was asking me, can you find out if people can tell you about the difference between medium format and a 50 megapixel medium format and a 50 megapixel 5DS? And I just was like, hey, does anybody have some advice for me and for my friend? And people just destroyed me. They were ripping me apart and saying, oh yeah, you're a friend. You're just hiding your ignorance behind like what is going on, people? Why are you guys so mean? People are so mean. I will never, photography is fun and it's joyful and it's cool. Cameras are awesome and they're fun. Sometimes they're frustrating. I do that. I get it. But at the same time, we can't be fanboys to the point where we're mean to each other. Like if I'm out and I'm shooting and I'm getting bad results, everybody was at Fred Miranda, pointing their fingers and saying, you're just a terrible photographer and you don't know what you're doing. I don't understand when my videos are showing side by side with the other brands and then the Fuji, and they're not even close at all, but they're going to blame me. I gotta say one more thing about that. And then I'll be done for sure, is this idea that you have to tweak your autofocus so intensely every time you go out into a situation that in order to get good results with Fuji, you just have to do that and you have to accept that. That's also unacceptable. If I go to the store and take a Canon camera, an R5, R6, R7, an APS-C camera, or I could take a Sony A7IV and I could just put it on wide tracking, or I could just, actually, you just tell it to focus on faces, and it just does it whether someone's standing or walking left or right, or they're running towards you, or there's trees in the background, and it just focuses on them most of the time. That is awesome. And Fuji needs to get to that place, even if there is some magical combination of settings and lenses and all that stuff that will get Fuji to be better. They have to get better out of the box, because we want everybody to love and enjoy photography. They don't have to be specialists in fine-tuning their autofocus, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at. Fuji community has become more toxic. Yes. I agree. And I think that, can we add these? Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm using Ecamm Live and I have no idea what I'm doing. Fuji's community has become more toxic than Sony's, and it might be true. I think that Fuji people have a chip on their back a little bit. They want their cameras to be, they don't want there to be a but at the end of the sentence. You could always say Fuji cameras are great, but Fuji cameras have awesome color, but Fuji cameras look beautiful, but, and that but is almost always the autofocus. Seriously, and I think this was supposed to be our Fuji fanboy coming out party where finally the focus is great, and it's better maybe, but it's just not as great, and people I think are upset. You could be upset, just be nice to people, right? To be nice to each other. So, all right, this is cool. This has been fun. I'm going to try to do more live streams. Let me know, for the couple of you that watch this, what you think. Yeah, Lost and Burrow, I think all fanboys are toxic. I think right now Fuji's a little bit more upset right now because my video and stuff. I think they're mad at me, but that's okay. And we'll call it quits now, and I'll put some of those files below so you can actually go and download them and check it out. If I could figure out how to end this live stream, we could actually end it. And this is fun, guys. Thanks for watching.